Before the video begins, I just want to say thank you all so much for the amazing support that you've shown so far. I know it's a little late. I've been dragging my feet a little bit, but Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, welcome to 2025. Again, thank you so much, guys. I didn't think, July, August of last year that I would even break 1,000 subscribers before 2025 hit, and you guys pushed it past 2,500 subscribers. So I cannot thank you enough, and I hope you keep enjoying the content that I'm putting out. I'm sorry it's taking a little while, but, such is life. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. The first video that I made on my channel that did really well and still holds the record for most viewed on my channel is Yu-Gi-Oh related. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure if it was just due to lucky timing, the Yu-Gi-Oh community being passionate about what I had to say, the thumbnail, or just my passion in general. Either way, it's been a minute, so I wanted to circle back around and talk about my favorite card game once again. This time talking on the subject of some individual cards themselves. Did you as a kid ever see some of the cards in the show, compare them to the real life counterparts and think to yourself, well, that doesn't make any damn sense? Or even see one of the cards in the show and it would be tweaked in some way? Well, me too, as it turns out. So without further ado, here are 5 cards that really need some TLC. All the cards on today's list are something that I would categorize as anime relevant, as each one of these cards either played a part in a very pivotal moment in the show, or just took place in an iconic battle or had an iconic showing, but fell flat in the real world. And the first one on today's list needs a complete overhaul in general. Dark Sage is a decently strong monster with an absolutely convoluted process of summoning and no self-protection at all. Granted, this came from a time where the game was much slower. However, this was presented as the final trick up Yugi's sleeve when facing against Joey in the semi-final selection of the Duelist Kingdom tournament. This card was only summoned by happenstance and luck. Yugi knew Joey would rely on Time Wizard to help him in this duel as he did with every other Duelist Kingdom duel, but would have had to have been extremely lucky himself to position Dark Magician on the field while Time Wizard's effect not only activates, but also succeeds. And the monster in question, while cool in concept, doesn't really do much of anything. Sure, it allows you to add a spell card to hand, which then immediately allows you to continue your combo more than likely, but if the process to get the monster out is so strenuous, the small effect of gaining an additional spell card is definitely not worth it. Honestly, to make this card make more sense, it should have just been a fusion monster. The Dark Magician extra deck is already filled with a slew of fusion monsters, so adding one more to the mix doesn't really hurt anything. And to make the concept make sense in the duel, Joey could have used Time Wizard and failed, at which point Yugi would have used Monster Born to bring back the Time Wizard, fuse it, and present the Dark Sage to everyone. This would still represent the combination of Yugi and Joey's friendship over time, and would facilitate using the monster much easier. The stats could stay the same, being a more defensive and wise Sage rather than an offensive Magician. The effect could still be minor, only netting you one spell card upon summoning, and ultimately doing the small change would make the card actually playable, and in my opinion, would make it much more iconic in a good way this time. Speaking of the Duelist Kingdom, you can't mention Yu-Gi-Oh's crazy first season without mentioning its crazy first main villain. Maximilian Pegasus is the creator of the Duel Monsters card game, and with the abilities of his Millennium Eye has powers unmatched by most, so one would think that his deck would exude power. The most powerful of monsters and the most deceptive of traps. But as the viewer, we're introduced to storybooks. Regardless of expectations, we were met with a villain who had several tricks up his sleeve and gave all of our favorite characters a major run for their money, and the cards that facilitated most of those close calls were his various Toon monsters. All of these Toon monsters are obviously just more cartoonified versions of other monsters, but most had the neat ability to attack directly a lot of the time and seem protected by the card that makes all of this possible, Toon World. Now, Toon World is an interesting card because, for one, it plays more like a field spell than it does a continuous, but it's a continuous spell. Its real-life counterpart just requires paying 1,000 life points to play it and has no further effects. While the anime version of this card allowed Toon monsters to quote-unquote dodge attacks like its Pokemon, or just hide in the book itself to become untargetable. This type of self-protection is definitely something more akin to modern Yu-Gi-Oh, so it makes sense why this card felt so overpowered in the anime. But looking at it now, it has nothing. No self-protection, no secondary effects upon hitting the field, just pay 1,000 and pray nothing happens to it. And that's not to say that there haven't been modern support cards to make the Toon deck somewhat playable, but I think the real-life version of the original Toon World should have a little bit more oomph to it, to make it stand out a little bit more, and make it a lot more like its anime counterpart. And I think the best way we do that is twofold. One, this card cannot be destroyed by card effect while a Toon monster is on the field, and two, you receive half battle damage from all battles involving a Toon monster. Doing these small changes would definitely keep the deck alive a lot longer, considering all the times needed to pay life points with some of these cards' effects, and would give Toon World itself a bit more of a threatening presence, I feel like. Making the player think like, I really need to get rid of Toon World, but I have too many monsters to face first, I gotta get rid of them first. Essentially, I want this card to make the deck to feel like a horde battle, where Toon monsters just keep coming out of the book to protect it. But once the book can't produce any more creatures, it then becomes vulnerable. After the iconic Yu-Gi-Oh series wrapped up, the need for more adventure and cool cards still existed, so of course a new series was made. Enter Yu-Gi-Oh GX. And along with the new series came one of the best intros of all time, don't argue with me, amazing monsters that shape the future of the game, and characters who, in my opinion, are just as iconic as the original. Well, some of anyways. And I'm sure if you're a fan of this franchise, you're all too familiar with the hero archetype. Monsters that all seemingly fuse into one another to bring out a stronger hero from the extra deck. Well, while I could talk about any number of the bad fusion monsters from Jaden or Cyrus's deck, the amazingly slow Crystal Beasts, or even how bad the Lord cards are, I want to take a look at another boss monster within Jaden's main deck today. A monster that, to my recollection, has only been summoned a handful of times, and its effect is kind of Time Wizard-esque in a way. Jaden will often summon Kuriboh level 10, hoping to just nuke the field on the opponent's battle phase and deal massive damage, often setting Kuriboh on the field as like a trap, thinking the opponent can attack into it as just like a little scapegoat. But with the emphasis that Kuriboh has on the series, it always felt a little weird to me that its level 10 counterpart was so niche and it didn't feel like a proper boss monster. It does a really good job of saving Jaden when he needs it, but rarely if ever does it deliver the finishing blow, and I want to give it that kind of opportunity. So I think this card just needs to be buffed overall. Its effect shouldn't be tied to only the opponent's battle phase, as they are able to choose whether or not they want to have one, ultimately deciding whether or not Kuriboh gets to use its effect. Instead, it should now be able to use its effect during either battle phase, making it much more versatile as a boss monster. Also, as the creature grows from level 1 to level 10, its stats should reflect that as well, and seeing as this monster has a whole angelic dragon thing attached to it, I think it would be appropriate to give its original stats times 10, ultimately giving it 3,000 attack and 2,000 defense. The monster itself has no self-protection, so I don't think these changes break the card in any way. Another spell card that had a huge impact on the season it was in fact being the center of the season itself, is the Seal of Orichalcos. Aside from just being a cool-ass name, this card by look alone seems like it would be some mystical spell or ritual that gives unforetold power at a cost. And the anime does a really good job at representing that with all the people who lose their souls in the pursuit of power. But the card in the anime and the card in real life are two completely different beasts. In real life, this card gives all of your monsters a 500 attack point boost, protects your weakest monster from battle, destroys all special summon monsters you control, protects itself once per turn, and prevents you from accessing the extra deck where all of your best monsters are likely at. Pretty mediocre, to be honest. Now, let's look at the anime counterpart. Still raises all monsters attack by 500, but the controller can now summon monsters in the spell and trap card zone instead of the monster zone. Any monster in the spell and trap card zone are protected by all monsters in the monster zones in front of them. Also, this card can't be destroyed by card effects, period. So on one side, you have a card that gives your monsters a small boost, protects the weakest monster from battle and itself once per turn, and overall isn't worth it.
while the other one boosts all of your monsters while giving them built-in protection by allowing them to move zones, and has permanent self-protection. These are not the same. So how would we go about even making this card fun/usable? Well, in this case, I do think it's the right move to just balance out the two, leaning more towards the anime side of things while keeping it grounded with some of its real-life effects. Overall, if we were to overhaul the card in general, I think it should read more like this. All monsters you control gain 500 attack. This card cannot be destroyed by card effects. While you control 2 or more monsters, your opponent cannot target your monster or monsters with the lowest attack for an attack. If you control no monsters, destroy this card. You can only activate the Seal of Orichalcos once per duel. With the effect like this, it keeps true to most of the nature by protecting itself and the monsters on the field, gives the ability to move the monsters around to adjacent monster zones, similar to the anime counterpart, but not the same, and has an additional effect of self-destructing with no monsters, adds a new balance to the card that shows its reliance on keeping multiple monsters on the field. I don't know if this would make the card super playable, but I at least think it would change it enough to make it interesting. Rounding out our list is a card that I would say has aura for sure, but no game whatsoever. When you think of the best and the most iconic Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time, I'm sure a lot of you will end up on the unstoppable Exodia. And why wouldn't you? The intro to this card is so iconic, and something that lets you auto-win a game is always going to be somewhat relevant. But if instead of a group of cards that allows you to win in a niche condition, what if instead we had a monster that represented the giant, brawlic nature and stature that a monster like Exodia holds? Enter Exodia Necross. This monster was introduced to us during a filler arc, so I wouldn't be surprised if many didn't see this card's appearance in the show, but when it was summoned, I really was in awe, and I remember thinking, damn, I really don't know what they're gonna do about this one. But the monster just ended up being a giant flop. Honestly, a dark counterpart to Exodia should have been the quintessential opposite in every way, but he's just jank and clunky as hell. First, you have to manage to get all Exodia pieces into the graveyard, ignoring the possibility of the auto-win function Exodia offers, have a specific spell card that needs to be activated, and also have Exodia Necross in hand. All for a monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense that has mediocre protection in today's culture, and overall is just way too much investment for a card that won't pay off. To make the card at least better and give it the status it deserves, it needs a complete overhaul for its ability. For starters, we're going to remove the need of the spell card contract with Exodia altogether. This is just another step in an already clunky process, and the whole point is to make the card usable. The monster now will be able to special summon itself from the hand so long as you have all 5 pieces of Exodia in the graveyard and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Can't be normal summon, can't be set. And we'll start with 5,000 attack, 0 defense. At the end of each turn, a random Exodia piece will be shuffled back into the player's deck, resulting in Exodia Necross losing 1,000 attack points each time a piece goes missing from the graveyard. Should all 5 pieces leave the grave, Exodia Necross destroys itself, and finally, just as an aesthetic change to the monster, Exodia Necross will now be level 10 instead of level 4. These changes turn the monster from an afterthought into an actual card who could have a central role in the archetype. Not only does it act as like the brawler to the strategy counterpart of trying to keep all the pieces in your hand, but having it on the field also shuffles pieces back into the deck for the potential to redraw them later on the off chance one got ditched against your will or something. Overall, these are major changes to this card, but ones that aren't unwarranted, I feel. This card really dropped the ball in action and only had a little presentation, and I feel my changes gives this card the status it deserves. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button down below for me. Make sure you are subscribed and you have that bell rung, that way you know when each and every single one of my videos comes out. And if you have an idea for a video that you'd like to see me talk about, or a subject you'd like to hear me talk about, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, I will see you all next time.